trudge down to the Rhone's pebbled banks just before dawn, the river's dark waters murmuring under a mist that clings to your cloak like a reluctant spectator. Across the bank, your ragged cavalry, infantry, and war elephants gather in tense silence, their breath pluming in the chill air. You feel the weight of history on your shoulders. This isn't just another river crossing. It's the prelude to a gamble that might shatter Rome's world. Mainstream fact: the Rhone River, a swift and unpredictable waterway, spans over 800 kilometers from the Alps to the Mediterranean, and during spring, melts its current can exceed 2 miles, making improvisational crossings perilous. Historians still argue whether Hannibal's engineers forded the main channel directly or employed rafts and pontoons assembled from local timber. You tighten your leather straps and salute the elephant's behemoths, long accustomed to North African sands, now stamping impatiently in the cold. Fringe accounts suggest Carthaginian mahouts greased elephant feet with sheep fat to improve traction on slippery stones, a bizarre innovation whispered among Roman prisoners in Campania. You crouch and press a finger to one elephant's rough pad, half expecting to feel the sheep's woolly slip beneath the grease. Joke 1: when your cross-Alpine footwear is sheer genius. The river's surface ripples as scouts probe the shallows, testing depth and current. You recall that Hannibal's vanguard scouted for a hidden fording spot about 10 kilometers upstream, an inlet where submerged limestone shelves slowed the torrent. Mainstream fact: ancient engineers often widened natural shallows by redirecting minor tributaries or building temporary earthen causeways. Scholars still debate whether the Carthaginians used sandbag diversions or trusted purely on local guide advice. A low bugle sounds, and the first men, wade in trousers, rolled high shields, held aloft to deflect icy spray. You join them, toes numb, as pebbles shift beneath you, water creeping past your knees. Fringe lore holds that Roman deserters among your ranks quietly sabotaged their comrades' footgear, loosening sandals to slow the crossing, a petty revenge tactic that nearly cost Hannibal precious hours. You grit your teeth against the cold, raising your shield as pebbles bruise your shins. Midstream, the current takes your shield and nearly sweeps it downstream. You brace with every ounce of strength, planting your spear butt into the riverbed's gravel. Your comrades grunt past you, forming a human line to shoulder shields and form a makeshift breakwater. Mainstream fact: soldier-to-soldier shield walls were commonly used in river crossings to create calmer channels. Historians still argue whether this tactic was a Carthaginian innovation or borrowed from Gallic allies. On the far bank, the elephants hesitate, their massive heads swing trunks probing the frigid flow. You watch as your mahout coaxes them forward with clicks and gentle prods. Fringe whispers claim that Carthage's prized elephants were conditioned to fear drowning by mock drills in shallow pools. but the true source of their Alpine courage remains debated. One elephant, towering above you, plants a heavy foot and thunders across water, swirling to its belly before it reaches solid ground. You exhale in relief, hand pressed to its side, feeling the flutter of its pulse through armored bellows. Behind you, the last lines cross water up to their waists. You glimpse Roman scouts on the opposite hill, tiny dots in the pre-dawn gloom, too distant to intervene, yet close enough to unnerve. You raise your voice, calling orders to form ranks and shake out the water, tossing capes and gear into makeshift racks to drain. The clatter of armor and low animal cries fill the clearing, a cacophony born of relief and triumph. At the river's edge, you sink to one knee, scooping icy water to your lips. Each gulp steals the hot fire from your chest, but you taste the Rhone itself, its cold clarity, a baptism for the campaign ahead. Behind you, the fog lifts, revealing the foothills' dark silhouettes. The Alps loom beyond a jagged promise you're only beginning to fulfill. You rise, boots squelching on river mud, and signal the engineers to dismantle the raft bridges. The crossing complete, you stand amid dripping shields and shivering soldiers, feeling the Rhone's silent applause in every drop. Ahead, the journey grows steeper and the stakes higher. But for now, you've bested the river, and history bends its course in your wake. You press into the jungle's edge under a moonless sky, the silhouettes of Rome's outposts receding behind you as drumming insects swell into a symphony of night. Cloaked by shadow and silence, your Carthaginian vanguard slips past hastily manned lookouts whose torches sputter in the damp air. Each footfall is measured, each breath held as you navigate a narrow goat path choked with ferns and twisting roots. This is no grand parade, but a furtive departure, soldiers and elephants alike melting into the night toward unknown heights. Mainstream fact, Roman scouts known as exploratores routinely patrolled the Rhone's eastern banks using watchtowers and signal fires to detect large crossings. Yet Hannibal's nocturnal advance exploited gaps between patrol circuits, forcing the Romans to rethink their border security. Historians still debate whether these patrols were adequately coordinated or hampered by overconfidence in the Rhone's natural defense. Your cloak's hem snags on a bramble, and you pause, heart-hammering to free it before a startled war elephant nearly treads upon you. Its leathery trunk coils in the darkness, scenting the air for commands. Behind you, infantry lines halt as their centurii adjust torches low enough to illuminate the path without revealing their mass. Fringe accounts claim that Hannibal's engineers soaked torches in a mixture of pine resin and goat's fat, producing a nearly smokeless flame, imperceptible beyond 10 paces, an innovation whispered to have baffled Roman sentries. You crouch to inspect a discarded torch stub and sniff its resinous tip, smokeless indeed, almost magical in its hush. Joke 1. when your campfire becomes a ninja star. Stealth pyrotechnics, Carthaginian style. You advance in single file, led by local Gaulish guides, whose laments to the spirits echo in the underbrush. Their knowledge of hidden deer trails guides you around Roman watchpoints, each twist and fork a potential ambush turned safe conduit. You follow markings, they carved into soft bark, 3 vertical notches for safe, 1/ for danger, trusting these furtive symbols more than any imperial map. Mainstream fact: Hannibal recruited Gallic tribesmen from the Allobroges and Taurini, leveraging their intimate terrain knowledge to navigate pre-Roman roads and animal trails. Historians still argue how critical this local alliance was versus Carthage's own military engineering. A sudden flicker at the edge of your vision draws your gaze to a lone torch beyond thorn-lined barricades. You flatten against a mossy bank, heart stuttering as a pair of Roman scouts pace before a palisade. Their armor clinks softly, and their torches carve fleeting arcs through bamboo stalks. You hold your breath until they pass, then exhale in a silent wave that stirs the dew. You tap the guide's shoulder. He offers a wry grin, whispers, "Step lightly," and you lift a foot above a displaced plank, recalling that some Romans planted false planks, hollowed traps meant to snap under unsuspecting weight. You step carefully, half expecting a snap, but the wood holds. Beyond the barricade, the path climbs steadily, each step slanting upward into steep foothills. The night's humidity gives way to a chill wind that whistles through rocky crags. You adjust your woolen cloak, the fabric muffling the metallic clink of your sword belt. Beside you, soldiers stow their heavier weapons on pack mules, retaining only pilum and gladius for immediate defense. Fringe lore holds that Hannibal's mule drivers lined saddlebags with lamb's wool to quiet hoofbeats on stone, a pastoral trick no Roman cavalry would anticipate. You press your ear to a mule's side and catch only its soft swish of tail. The ascent grows steeper. Brambles tear at boots and grips on your spear's haft. You glance at the flank where war elephants plod, their massive forms outlined in phosphorescent moss that clings to lichen-covered rocks. You recall that Hannibal had shamans apply crushed firefly carapaces to the elephants' foreheads, glowing spots that amused the beasts and warded off nocturnal predators. You peer for a faint glow, but see only solid black shapes moving like will-o'-the-wisps in the gloom. Suddenly the guide halts the column. Ahead lies a rocky outcrop where Roman lookouts perch 2 statuesque sentries silhouetted against the low hill's gray. You crouch low, heart thumping, as scimitars slide from scabbards. Hannibal's chosen silent strike teams, armed with daggers and bucklers, fan out, edging toward the ledge's flank. You creep forward, toes splaying on loose gravel, and catch a sentry's helmet crest for a swift knockout. He crumples without a cry, and you catch his torch before it spatters to the rocks below. Its light flares briefly, then you extinguish it with your thumb. The other sentry whirls at the dim glow, but a muffled strike from your comrade sends him sprawling. You help drag both bodies into a rocky nook, masking them beneath ferns and stones. Each motion is deliberate, no flourish or boast. Mainstream fact night raids on enemy sentries were a recognized tactic in Punic warfare, detailed in Polybius's accounts of Hannibal's nocturnal operations. Historians still debate the frequency and scale of these silent incursions versus pitched battles. You rise as the final bodies are hidden. The guide signals and the column threads past the outcrop, entering a narrow gorge rimmed with sharp limestone teeth. Cold tends to the marrow here. Your breath hangs in a trembling cloud. You sense that Roman patrols, confident of their river defenses, will not expect an enemy emerging on these heights until dawn. You allow yourself a small smile. Tonight's secret departure transforms the mountains into your ally rather than barrier. Above the first stars fade as pale streaks of dawn brush the eastern sky. You press forward each step, now lit by growing light, leaving Roman spy lines behind. The climb steepens into switchbacks carved by savage crags. Your boots slip on shale and scree. Yet, the initial gamble pays off. The Romans awaken to empty banks and puzzled commanders, while your column presses on ghosts in the hills toward the Alps' white summits. You step into the gorge's narrowing corridor, shoulder to shoulder, with men whose eyes gleam with resolve. The secret departure is complete. You've slipped past Rome's watchful gaze, taken the fight into the mountains, and set the stage for a march that will echo through centuries. Ahead, the climb awaits higher, colder, more perilous. But for now you savor the triumph of stealth solidarity and the thrill of slipping free under cover of darkness. You press onward as dawn's pale fingers stretch over mist-shrouded foothills, each step lifting you higher into a realm of gnarled oaks and moss-slick stone. The path narrows to a single track carved into the slope, its edges crumbly with loose shale. Your pack laden with grain, wine, amphorae, and spare sandals jostles against your back, each creak and groan a reminder of the army's lifeblood humming in canvas sacks. You taste the tang of sweat and pine resin on your lips, and your lungs fill with the sharp scent of wet earth and resinous needles. Mainstream fact: Hannibal's army traversed the Alps with an estimated load of 90 kilograms per infantryman carrying food, weapons, and personal gear. Historians still argue whether such burdens were reduced at higher altitudes to maximize speed or carried intact for sustained campaigning. The slope beneath your boots pitches steeply, forcing you to lean into your staff for purchase. Thick undergrowth ferns, brambles, and tangled vines reaches for your calves, snagging your cloak and nicking exposed skin with thorny fingers. You pause to slice a rattling vine with your gladius, imagining the weapon doubling as jungle shears in a pinch, Fringe accounts claim some Carthaginian soldiers greased their cloaks with bear fat to repel brambles, a slippery countermeasure whispered among mule handlers. You rub a smear of fat along your sleeve and joke one when your morning wardrobe doubles as anti-thorn armor, fashion, or function. Every so often the path ascends an earthen stair formed by centuries of footfalls. You test each step with care, toes splaying on damp rock before planting your heel firmly. Your pack's weight shifts, threatening to topple you backward. You grit your teeth and adjust the straps, recalling the Gallic allies who tightened each knot with silent efficiency. You remember Section 2's stealth tactics and realize this is a different kind of test fortitude over furtiveness. From a rocky ledge to your right, you glimpse the Rhone's distant glint, now a thin ribbon far below. You lean over the precipice heart, fluttering, and watch morning swallows dive through dew-laden air. The sight steels your resolve. The river is won, but the mountains still guard their summit. Mainstream fact altitude gain on Hannibal's route exceeded 1,200 meters in a single day's march, with some historians arguing that the crossing peaked near 2,000 meters before descending into Italy's valleys. Debate endures over whether Hannibal chose the Graian or Cottian Alps, both routes claimed by ancient sources. The path narrows further, forcing camels and elephants to negotiate tight turns. You halt as an elephant lumbering ahead shoves its mahout against the embankment trunks and tusks brushing precarious rocks. You step aside to guide the beast past a particularly sharp bend, pressing your shield against its flank. The pachyderm's breath woofs in a low rumble, its eyes steady and unruffled. Fringe lore suggests Carthaginian handlers fed their elephants crushed pine cones to dull digestive noises that might echo through canyons and betray their ascent. You search the ground for stray pine fragments and joke, too. Elephant chew toy or stealth snack, either way, bark is the word. Further up, torrents of spring meltwater carve rivulets beside the trail, turning deeps into ankle-deep streams that sluice over mossy rocks. You thrust your staff into the frothing flow, testing its strength, and then step onto a water-smoothed boulder, careful to avoid algae's slick sheen. A misplaced foot would send you sliding into the swirl, losing both pack and pride. Mainstream fact: ancient military engineers often built simple stone causeways or rudimentary culverts to channel meltwater away from tracks. Historians still debate how much Hannibal relied on local brigades versus his own engineers for these improvements. Your pack begins to chafe at your hips, the leather straps biting into tired flesh. You pause to swap your wine amphora for a lighter water skin. A mid-March rationing you planned the night before. You twist the skin stopper, gulping icy water that tastes of mountain minerals and grit. The relief is immediate, though temporary. The path climbs again this time, at a hair-raising 40-degree angle. You lean into the slope, balancing on staff and shield, and recall Section 1's river tactics, shield walls, and greased feet. But here, The only order is upward. Each step is a negotiation between gravity's inexorable pull and human will. Fringe tales speak of Carthaginian soldiers chanting rhythmic odes to Baal Hammon to steady their ascent invocations echoing off rock faces, forging spiritual footholds where none existed. You lift your voice in a soft hum, matching the cadence of your staff, tapping the ground, a personal mountain mantra. The undergrowth opens to reveal a grove of ancient pines, their trunks gnarled and pillars of forest history. Among their roots, you spot discarded boot soles, lost by men who underestimated the terrain. You kneel to inspect them, hobnailed leather, worn smooth in places, nails protruding where rubber heels failed to grip. You tuck a nail into your pouch, a meager trophy of trial and error. Above the morning sun breaks shafts of gold, piercing the canopy and igniting motes of pollen into swirling galaxies. You squint, hand shielding your eyes, and see the faint outline of a rocky outcrop marking the pass's base. It's closer now, or perhaps the climb has become so familiar that all heights shrink in the light of progress. Your ears catch the distant trumpeting of an elephant, an unmissable horn heralding its own struggle. You fall in beside it, guiding its path, as it strains to pull a laden wagon of spare sandals and metal rivets, each replacement crucial for soldiers' blistered feet. The wagon's wooden wheels groan under weight, cracking a melody of labor against the stone. Fringe engineering whispers suggest these wagons were fitted with wooden spokes bound in bronze to resist warp in damp conditions, a tiny miracle of ingenuity. You pat a spoke and joke. 3. Carriage return. More like carriage endure. At last you round the rocky outcrop's base into a narrow cirque where the path straightens. A shallow trench dug to hold benches of rock offers a respite for marching lines. You collapse against the trench's lip, arms spread wide, breathing the Alpine air's crisp purity. Behind you, the trail you've conquered snakes down into foothill forests, a testament to every sliver of will and wobble of limb. You steady yourself, then rise and shake free the fatigue that clings to every joint. Soldiers and beasts alike filter into the cirque, shedding packs and stretching stiff limbs. You oversee the formation of a temporary bivouac, ordering scouts to secure wood and engineers to clear a flat space for midday rest. As you survey the encampment, you recall the elephant's grease-slippery feet, the Gaulish torch innovations, and the vine-shearing sword swings. Each hardship has been met with adaptation, a hallmark of Hannibal's campaign. The foothill challenge is won not by brute force alone, but by resourcefulness entwined with resolve. Ahead looms the first true snows of the Alps, a frozen crown you have yet to earn. But in this cirque, warmed by sun and human kinship, you gather strength for the trials to come. You grip your staff, its carved notches filled with the story of every step and signal, the march's continuation upward, ever upward, into history's highest stakes. You awake before dawn to a world transformed oak and pine replaced by silent sentinels of stone and ice. The first flakes drift down like pale feathers, dusting your cloak and tinting the rocky ground in ghostly white. You lift a gloved hand, letting flakes melt into rivulets that trace icy paths across your palm. Each drop is a shiver of winter's promise. The Alps have claimed their threshold, and you taste snow's first bite in your lungs and on your tongue. Across the cirque, soldiers shiver in tunics stiff with frost. Elephants stand motionless, trunks curled against chattering tusks, their breath steaming in the silver air. You stomp a boot to clear snow-slick stone boots cracking against thin ice. Fringe lore suggests Carthaginian scouts collected early snowflakes to predict sudden storms, of folk meteorology whispered in the ranks. You rub your thumb against your forefinger and joke. One, when your weatherman is Mother Nature herself, no satellite required. Mainstream fact: snowfall in the Western Alps typically begins between late September and early October at elevations above 200 mm, often catching armies unprepared. Historians still argue whether Hannibal's forces anticipated the Alpine winter or were forced into rapid ascent before deeper snows fell. Summoning your strength, you signal the column to move. Shields become shovels. Lines of infantry scrape snow into windrows, forging a narrow track for pack mules and elephants. Each flake becomes a hurdle. Arms ache from shoveling fingers, numb despite layered gloves. You inhale cold air, tasting mineral frost and evergreen needles that cling to the gusts. Higher still, the trail narrows to a frozen gully. You brace your staff on the ice, each step measured to avoid slipping into a crevasse hidden by fresh drifts. Your breath mists like a pale lantern, and you lean into your mantle, its woolen thickness, a fragile fortress against coursing cold. Fringe engineers once packed straw beneath stone slabs to insulate steps. You prod at a tuft of hay, sticking out from under. Rock and joke, too. When your welcome mat is also a thermos. Cozy or cozy. Snow muffles all else. No insects, no river. Roar, only the crunch of soles on ice and the low rumble of elephant footfalls. Mainstream fact: Hannibal's war elephants likely suffered the worst from Alpine cold, as their North African origins left them ill-adapted to sub-zero conditions. Historians still debate whether elephants carried extra thermal blankets or if many perished en route. You reach a ledge where a thin cornice overhang threatens to drop a slab of ice with each breath. You crouch and chip away at its lip with your gladius, sending ice chips tinkling into the void. Each fragment echoes down the valley like distant bells. Below, guides shout warnings as mules below jolt from the rattles. Your heart pounds in time with their agitation. This is Alpine risk, writ small. Onward, the path gains a steep switchback, dusted in crisp powder. You follow the baited line of footsteps ahead, ruts carved by earlier marches, trusting these grooves more than any map. Your legs burn each step, sucking into powder, demanding fresh exertion. A sudden wind gust whips snow into a blizzard blur, forcing you to close your eyes and lean into the staff, trusting its notch-marked handle to guide you straight. Fringe tales say some soldiers wrap their heads in oiled cloth to repel snow. You feel your scarf's slick whisper against your cheek and joke. 3. When your balaclava becomes a deflector shield. Next upgrade, grape shot. Finally, you crest a narrow spur where the full weight of winter descends. Swirling flakes dance in tumultuous whirl, and the world narrows to the circle of your vision, framed by snow-laden cliffs. You cup your hands to warm them, with your breath tasting frost, as if it were salt on your tongue. In that brief respite, you sense the Alps' guarded secret beauty, woven with peril. Your gaze drifts to the men huddled below, some kneeling to cup snow for water, others dragging packs, weighed down by packed snow drifts. Even the elephants bend trunks to scrape flakes from their backs. You step forward, offering a water skin to a frost-chapped infantryman whose teeth chatter like brittle bones. He takes a grateful sip, then squeezes your arm in silent thanks. Mainstream fact: the loss of water sources under snowdrifts forced armies to melt snow over campfires, consuming precious fuel. Historians still debate whether Hannibal's advance slowed to conserve wood or pressed on until slopes eased. You gather small bundles of dry pine bark and kindle a lean fire in a shallow scrape, flames trembling against the wind. Soldiers huddle close backs to the blaze, and you rake embers to life. The fire's glow, a beacon of warmth in an ocean of white. Smokeless resin crackles, scenting the air with pine's sweet resin. You watch human forms emerge from snow's veil, gaunt faces brightened by firelight, united against the mountain's embrace. Here, in snow's first bite and fire's first lick, you savor a moment of reprieve on this arduous path. The wind's howl beckons you onward, higher, colder, yet closer to Italy's sunlit plains. You rise staff in hand and step back onto the carved track boots, sinking into fresh drifts, carrying snow's chill and the fire's warmth within you as the column threads ever upward. You pause at a rocky cleft where the trail's gradient eases into a narrow ledge lined with scrubby juniper and lichen-clad outcrops. Your gut rumbles empty, except for the stale barley cakes shoved into your tunic before dawn. Around you, soldiers unwrap leather pouches, yielding slices of salted pork and hardened bread. The sight sparks a sudden pang of hunger, as sharp as the mountain air itself. You break a compressed barley cake, its coarse grains rasping on your teeth, and chew mindfully each morsel, a reminder of sustenance so precious here. Mainstream fact: Carthaginian rations on Alpine campaigns consisted primarily of dried meats, hardtack, and small amphorae of concentrated wine. Historians still argue how these limited supplies influenced marching pace and morale. Your eyes drift to the war elephants, lumbering below their mahouts, ladling watery gruel into troughs carved from hollowed rock. The elephants' breaths steam in pale plumes, each exhalation a fog of need and effort. Fringe anecdotes suggest that mahouts mixed the elephant's gruel with melted cheese from goat herds encountered on the slopes, enriching the bland mash with fats that boosted caloric intake. You imagine cheese curds mingling with oat remnants and smile at the incongruity. Alpine fondue, you joke, one Carhartian style. Beyond the ledge, gnarled hawthorn trees yield twisted berries, sour but edible. You pluck a handful, pop one into your mouth, and wince as its tart juice stains your tongue. A nearby guide, eyes twinkling, points to moss-covered packs where boiled roots and foraged herbs are stored. He digs into a pouch and offers you a handful of dried nettle leaves, bitter but rich in protein, dried in the sun before the ascent. You steep them in a chipped pewter cup of snowmelt, inhaling the earthy aroma as you wait for the infusion to lend warmth. You sip the nettle tea. Its astringent tang fights the edge of cold in your veins. Mainstream fact: ancient herbalists prized nettles for their iron content and mild stimulant properties, believing they fortified blood and warded off fatigue. Historians still debate whether Carthaginian military medics systematically incorporated local botanicals into ration planning or relied solely on traditional fare. The midday sun momentarily breaks through cloud, casting a spotlight on the rocky path ahead. You trace a silhouette of a soldier ahead, whose cheeks are hollow with hunger, his eyes fixed on the distant switchbacks. You offer him your cup. He drinks gratefully, then passes it down the line. Each man's hand trembles with weariness and hope. Fringe lore claims that early expeditions carried small flasks of concentrated honey wine, a potent sugary tonic used sparingly to stave off exhaustion during critical ascents. You reach into your pack and produce a tiny flask, uncorking it for the group. The amber liquid glints in the light. One by one they take a sip, faces lighting as sweetness floods their systems. You swallow a small measure yourself, warmth blooming in your chest like a fledgling fire. Liquid courage, you quip, and the men laugh, a brittle, bright sound that echoes off the rock faces. Refreshed, you eye the path's next challenge, a narrow chute where loose scree hides firm rock beneath. You distribute stale bread slices, trainees tearing them into crumb-sized bits to mix with pine nut detritus gathered from beneath nearby cones. The makeshift porridge is gritty but filling. You feel fullness bloom in your belly, anchoring you As you approach the scree, shield-clad, you guide a mule laden with spare sandals and tools through the chute, its hooves skittering before finding grip. Below, porters reinforce footholds by stacking flat stones, creating improvised steps that trap dust and lend purchase. You join them, tucking your tunic's sash into a makeshift belt to free your arms and lift stones, each one a morsel of safety for the pack animals and men behind. Mainstream fact builders of mountain roads often embedded stones and wooden sleepers into scree to stabilize slopes. Historians still debate whether Hannibal's engineers arrived with pre-planned techniques or adapted spontaneously to each terrain's demands. You work until muscles burn sweat, beating at your brow despite the cold. Then, with the path secured, you call onward and watch the column pick its way upward with newfound confidence. A sudden cry rings below. A porter has slipped, pack tumbling legs splayed on the scree. You descend swiftly, staff in hand, and offer a steadying arm as he struggles to rise. His boots are scuffed, trousers torn, but he grins through embarrassment and thrusts his elbow into your palm. "I'm good," he huffs, then bows his head in thanks. Fringe accounts note that veteran porters tied small bells to their loads, jingly alarms, warning of sliding packs before human senses. You search his yoke and spot a battered bell, its tin surface nicked but intact. As you help him resettle his pack, you notice the scent of roasting pine nuts drifting across the ledge, a small camp where scouts pause to refuel before pressing on. You follow the aroma to find baskets of warm nuts, rich, buttery, and fragrant, crisply toasted in portable clay ovens. You help yourself to a handful and munch thoughtfully as you return to the main trail, each nut a tiny victory against gnawing hunger. By the time the sun dips behind the craggy peaks, you reach a plateau where a shallow spring bubbles from rock. You kneel and cup the water, the liquid biting at the dryness within. Soldiers fill their flasks, and elephants bend trunks to drink. Mainstream fact-reliable water sources were plotted in advance by scouts and noted in portable journals. Historians still argue how precise these Alpine water charts were, and whether seasonal shifts undermined their accuracy. You fill your flask, then pass it to an officer whose gaunt face brightens at the sight. He lifts his head, eyes shining in lamplight, and declares, "We march again at first light." You nod, tucking the flask into your cloak. Tonight, hunger will be sated by foraged roots and pine nuts. Tomorrow the campaign will resume beneath the Alpine dawn. You lean against a cold stone, watching the last embers of daylight fade. The trail's hunger has been tempered for now, but you know the next challenge looms. Altitude's thin bite and the icy grip higher still. Yet with each ration shared, each improvised meal crafted, you carry nourishment of body and spirit into the mountain's embrace. You advance into thinner air as snow deepens each step, sucking at your boots like walking through a vault of frozen molasses. The wind slices at exposed skin, turning breath into tiny shards that glitter and vanish. Ahead, you glimpse Havila, a towering helmsman of a soldier stooped by pain, his feet swollen and mottled purple. You catch your breath. Frostbite's silent claim has begun to toll its brutal count. Mainstream fact: frostbite occurs when tissue freezes at temperatures below 0.55 degrees C, causing ice crystals to form in cells and leading to potential tissue death. Armies crossing high passes often saw up to 10% of troops sustain frostbite injuries. Historians still argue whether ancient commanders like Hannibal prioritized speed to outrun cold over establishing heated camps to prevent casualties. You kneel beside Havila and gently unstrap his boot, revealing toes rigid as driftwood. His eyes flutter at the sting of rewarming, and you murmur reassurance. A medic squats nearby, unrolling a blanket of wool and heated stones wrapped in leather. Fringe whispers hold that some Carthaginian medics carried animal brain-soaked cloths believed to draw out cold by mimicking living tissue's warmth. You watch as the medic presses the cloth against Havila's toes. The frostbitten digits hiss with thaw, an ASMR-worthy crackle that echoes through the cirque. You suppress a shiver and joke. When your medical kit includes sheep's brain, talk about unique therapy. Around you, frost-crusted forms cluster into huddles. Soldiers trade boots to compare frost damage. Some toes are blackened bone visible through split skin. You recall that Hannibal's reports mention many lost to the cold's embrace, but no exact tally. You whisper to the medic, "How many so far?" He shrugs his hand steady, but voice tight. "Too many." You help Havila's comrade bind each thawed toe with oil-treated linen strips. Mainstream fact: applying animal fat or grease before exposure was a known ancient practice to insulate extremities. Modern scholars still debate whether such greases offered real protection or merely provided psychological comfort. Doctors still argue whether greased leather or layered clothing was the most effective defense against Alpine chill. Further up, a group of elephant handlers tend to their beasts, securing wool blankets around the elephant's feet and leg joints. Fringe lore suggests that mahouts stuff the elephant's sandals with live straw to trap body heat, creating rudimentary thermostats under each foot. You approach and press a hand against an elephant's padded sole. It's surprisingly warm beneath the straw's insulation, a testament to inventive field improvisation. Your lungs burn in the rarefied air, and you taste iron and pine resin on each exhalation. You rise and press onward, following a line of medics guiding frost-numbed troops to a sheltered alcove. The alcove's walls glow with moss-heated lamps. Clay vessels filled with slowly burning oil that cast a gentle yellow light on ice-streaked rock. The effect is hypnotic flickering warmth, painting the walls in trembling patterns. Within men lie on furs, limbs swathed in bandages, faces slack with relief. You pass a stretcher bearing a soldier whose toes have turned to bone-white columns of ice. His jaw clenches as the medic gently thaws his frozen fingers one at a time. You avert your gaze at the sight, but the rhythmic hiss of steam from the thaw cloths draws you back. It's the sound of survival. A decorated centurion stands overseeing triage with a grim calm. He shouts orders, rotate positions, warm arms now, and porters pass crates of heated stones wrapped in clay pots. Soldiers clutch the pots to their sides, imparting radiating heat to belly and thigh. Mainstream fact: portable hearthstones were standard in Roman campaigns. Through cold regions, heated in communal fires and carried in covered niches. Historians still debate how many stones per man were considered essential. Some believe 3 per soldier was the norm. Others argue that scarcity forced armies to improvise with far fewer. You spot a young recruit cradling a small ire of heated stones against his cheek, his eyes fluttering in drifting sleep. You crouch and gently cover him with an extra cloak, brushing frost from his brow. His breath slows into a steady cadence captured in the alcove's hush. The juxtaposition of fire's crackle and the wind's roar outside is a lullaby of paradox, survival wrapped in ice and flame. Stepping back outside, you survey the narrow ledge where frostbite claimed so many. Each frozen casualty represents lost strength, a ripple in the army's resolve. Yet, on the far ridge, you glimpse red-tunicked reinforcements advancing, carrying banners tipped with red cloth that promise fresh vigor. You raise a hand in silent salute to their approach. A mule train descends laden with barrels of heated oil, olive oil warmed by friction and stored in oiled skins. Fringe narratives recount that some units simmered oil over small campfires for hours, believing the enhanced temperature staved off deeper freezing when applied to limbs. You help unload the leather bags, inhaling the warm, nutty scent before passing a bag to a shivering medic. Mainstream fact: oil-based heat packs were documented in early surgical texts as effective thawing agents, though modern medicine warns of burns from overheated applications. Historians still debate whether ancient armies monitored temperatures precisely or risked further injury. You pause on the ledge's edge to catch your breath, the cold wind lifting snow into miniature funnels. You look down at carved paths below now, thick with ice, and realize the descent will demand every ounce of caution. Frostbite's toll here is more than physical. It's a lesson in vulnerability and collective endurance. Beyond the alcove, soldiers fortify their gear-felled pines, become makeshift shaft stoves for heat. Wine amphorae are halved and filled with hot stones to warm tents. You oversee the distribution, ensuring no man goes without a heat pack. Each warmed hand and thawed foot is a victory against the mountain's silent siege. A distant horn echoes the signal to march on. Frostbitten, though many are, the column must move, the summit awaits. You gather the bandaged wounded onto stretchers, assigning 2 men per stretcher and 2 more to bear lit torches overhead, an eerie procession of flickering light and bundled bodies. As the sun dips into the Alpine valley, you guide the wounded and the rest of the host along a gentler contour, safe from further frost, until night. Each step forward is a triumph over cold's claim. Every heated cloth, a defiance of winter's grasp. You taste pine and snow in the air, feeling the ache in your own blood thaw into determination. The frostbitten toll has been severe, but in every thawed digit and warmed heart, you see resilience woven into the campaign's tapestry. The Alps claim many, yet cannot claim every spirit. You press onward, the descent's promise in your sight, and the campfire's glow, tomorrow's warmth, guiding you through snow's first bite into history's unyielding climb. You edge into a narrow defile, where the mountain's rock walls press in on either side, their surfaces etched with ancient runes and shards of quartz that catch stray sunlight in brief dazzling flares. Ahead, the path forks one route, a steep scramble over shattered scree. The other, a sinuous incline, choked with thorny rhododendron. You pause, scanning both with the wary eye of a man who knows a misstep means hours of backtracking, or worse. It's then that your Gaulish guide steps forward, shoulders broad and clad in patched wolfskin, carving a slender branch into the earth to mark the camber of the safe path. His voice, low and melodic, drifts to you, this way where goats tread. You follow boots, crunching on pebbles, ears attuned to his whispered instruction. Mainstream fact, Hannibal enlisted Gallic tribesmen, especially from the Allobroges and Cavares, both for their fierce loyalty after Carthaginian victories and for their unparalleled knowledge of Alpine goat paths and hidden passes. Historians still argue whether this alliance was cemented by diplomacy or brute leverage. Your guide pauses at a cluster of hoof-stocked rocks and kneels, tracing a series of scratch marks, 3 parallel lines, and a diagonal slash. He smiles, explaining that Gallic scouts marked safe passages with these notches, each a code known only to initiates. Fringe, tidbit. Some scholars suggest these marks were scented with bear fat, making them perceptible by touch. In snowy conditions, a whispered tradition passed through druidic lineages. You lean in, brushing a gloved fingertip across the carvings, imagining the bear's musk mingled with damp stone. Joke. Nothing like a bear whiff. GPS to keep you on track, following the notches. You skirt a hidden bluff where a sudden gust could unseat an unwary traveler. The guide's hand steadies you at the elbow, the coarse texture of his wool sleeve a grounding reassurance. You taste the air faintly sweet, with alpine heather, and hear the distant murmur of melting snow cascading down unseen crevices. ASMR, like each drop, echoes in your mind. Plink, plink, plink. Ahead, a grotto of twisted bryophytes and ferns encloses a tiny pool of spring water. The guide kneels to test its clarity, then offers you your water skin. You kneel beside him and cup your hands, tasting liquid, cold enough to sear the freshest wounds. Mainstream fact reliable mountain springs were lifelines on ancient campaigns, and scouts memorized their locations to prevent dehydration. Historians still debate how accurately these water sources were mapped in pre-modern logistics. Refreshed, you rise and follow the guide into a slender tunnel of rock, a natural arch, barely wide enough for two men abreast. He holds a hand to his ear, listening for echoes. Sound of hollow, he whispers, then presses a finger to the wall and taps thunk, 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 solid stone. You try it yourself. The reverberation, a reassuring metronome. Fringe lore holds that early Gaulish wayfinders used echo imprints to distinguish living rock from fissured shale, mapping their routes by ear alone. You grin at the ingenuity. Joke. 2. When your local acoustics trump modern sonar beyond the arch, the path descends in a series of goat-worn steps, each one sunken and polished by centuries of cloven hooves. Your knees protest the drop, and you lean into your staff, feeling its bark-rough grip bite into your palm. You recall that these goat steps were often traveled by pilgrims long before military campaigns, their origins lost in misty folklore. Mainstream fact, such animal-made stairways provided predictable footing, and armies from Rome to Persia adapted them for troop movements. Historians still argue whether Hannibal's guides deliberately sought these routes or discovered them by happenstance. You emerge onto a high ledge carpeted with golden sedges, the panorama opening to reveal a basket weave of valleys and ridges smeared in slate gray and evergreen. The guide halts, raising a finger to point out distant smoke plumes, Gallic villages tending midday fires, unseen by Roman eyes. You swallow the view, tasting freedom's breath on your tongue. As you pause, a sudden ripple of wind carries the faint bray of goats tended by shepherds long gone. The echo drifts through the ledge like a lullaby of ages, blending with the soft click of your crampon studs on stone. The guide whispers the old shepherd's chant, an invocation to mountain spirits for safe passage. You catch fragments, pater montes vade mecum, a Latin echo mixed with Gaulish syllables. Historians still debate whether such chants were formal rites borrowed from Roman ritual or homegrown spells of the high tribes. You lean back, closing your eyes to the swirl of scents, pine resin, goat musk, damp stone. The guide dips into his satchel, producing a small cluster of dried elderflowers. He hands you one, explaining they ease stomach chills and boost morale. You brew a quick infusion in your water skin, inhaling the floral aroma as you sip. Fringe enthusiasts claim elderflower tea was the secret aid for ancient Celtic warriors crossing frost-crested peaks. You grin at the notion. Joke 3. When your hot toddy doubles as Highland spa therapy revived you, step forward onto the final goat path, a narrow ribbon etched into near vertical rock. Beneath lies a sheer drop that vanishes into swirling mists. The guide wraps a rope around his waist, knotting it to an iron python left by earlier travelers. He gestures for you to secure your own rope loop. Each knot is a vote of trust in rope, in guide, in self. You inch along plant by plant, rock by rock, heart thudding in sync with your laboring breath. The rope hums under tension, a lifeline strung between mortal hands and the mountain's edge. Below, the world is reduced to mist and memory, each step an act of faith. At last you reach a granite shelf, broad enough to stand free of rope's embrace. The guide releases your tether and offers a hand. You grasp it, pulling yourself onto solid ground. Behind you, the goat path winds like a serpent, beaten into submission. Ahead, the summit still looms another day's climb away, but the most treacherous gauntlet is behind you. You lower your staff and face your Gaulish guide, Gratitude, softening your features. He nods, eyes bright beneath wind-tangled hair. Together you survey the vast expanse below, a mosaic of valleys and ridges, forever changed by your passage. You breathe deeply, tasting the swirl of pine stone and elderflower on your breath. In the silent triumph of goat-born trails and tribal cunning, you carry forward the pulse of Hannibal's Alpine crossing, a testament to local knowledge, trust, and the art of stealth in the world's highest theaters. You trudge through a narrow defile when the stillness shatters with distant trumpet blasts, Roman horns echoing off icy crags, an ominous herald of pursuit. Your pulse spikes as you press against the cold rock face, straining to hear the crunch of enemy footsteps beyond the next bend. The air tastes of fear and frost, each breath a fragile plume that vanishes too quickly in the Alpine expanse. Mainstream fact: Roman legions under Emperor Tiberius had dispatched advanced cohorts to intercept Hannibal's descent, using light infantry and cavalry to shadow the Carthaginian vanguard. Historians still argue whether these mobile units operated under strict orders or improvised their pursuit based on local intelligence. Ahead, you catch the glint of scutum shields through a slit in the rock, legionaries massing for an ambush in the gorge below. Your guide's hand clamps your arm, eyes narrowed. He whispers, "They expect us to be weary." We strike swift. Fringe accounts claim that Hannibal taught his Numidian cavalry to mimic the neighing of mountain goats, startling Roman mounts into panic before a night raid, a tactic whispered among campfires, but absent from official annals. You inhale sharply, imagining phantom goat calls rising in the dark. Joke 1. When your cavalry doubles as goat choir, Battle of the Alps. Anyone? You draw your pilum, its spearhead cold against your palm, and signal the flanking party. Together, you slip along a narrow ledge above the Roman line, breath synchronized with the swell of wind. Below, the pursuers tighten their formation, clanking sandals on hard stone. You recall that surprise was Hannibal's greatest ally. Even a handful of men can tip the scales with the right moment. Mainstream fact ambush tactics were central to Punic doctrine, emphasizing flexibility and use of terrain. Scholars still debate whether Hannibal's ingenuity or Roman overconfidence shaped these encounter outcomes. Your heart hammers as you round the bend, emerging above a locked phalanx of Roman spears bristling toward the slope. You crouch, breath held, and then launch a volley of pilum spears, arcing in unison, shields creaking under fresh impact. The legionaries stagger, formations wavering. You lift your voice in a battle cry, and your unit surges down the slope, steel flashing boots skidding on scree. The Romans roar in surprise, hastily bracing scutum to form a shield wall mid-gorge. Fringe tidbit. Some historians suggest Hannibal's troops carried pre-sharpened stones to hurl at shield rims, fracturing the woodwork. You fling one yourself, its edge splintering a scutum board with a hollow crack that echoes like a thunderclap. You grin despite the danger. Joke 2. When your ammunition is geology, rock on steel, meets steel as you charge. You parry a gladius swipe with your shield, the clang ringing through the chasm. A Roman centurion snarls, pressing his blade toward your throat. You pivot, tossing your sword hilt into his ribs, the impact lifting him off his feet. He crashes back against his line, a chain reaction of staggered men. Mainstream fact. Close quarters combat in narrow mountain passes negated Rome's formation advantages, forcing individual heroics. Historians still debate whether such skirmishes were exceptions or hallmark engagements of Alpine warfare. Behind you, the Numidian cavalry strikes the Roman rear with whistling javelins. Horses rear their riders, weaving between pikes. You seize the moment, rallying your comrades with a raised gladius. The Romans break shouts and curses, ricocheting as they spill uphill to escape the defile. You grip your staff to steady a wounded comrade, offering a steadying word as he staggers past. Exhausted but exhilarated, you chase the fleeing Romans to the gorge's mouth, where the thin Alpine air carries their retreating cries down into the valley. You stand panting, shield raised, as your guide emerges beside you, nodding grim approval. You exchange a quick clasp of forearms, silent recognition of shared danger and victory. As you gather the wounded and collect Roman scuta as trophies, you taste ash and adrenaline on your tongue. The gorge yawns behind you, its walls stained with blood and echoes. Ahead, the path narrows again before climbing toward the final summit. Mainstream fact pursuit engagements often stalled at narrow passes where Carthaginian forces could leverage terrain to neutralize Rome's numerical superiority. Historians still debate the long-term impact of these skirmishes on the campaign's morale. You pause to catch your breath, then hoist a fallen Roman helmet by its crest, a battered prize cold and heavy in your hand. Fringe lore suggests that some Carthaginian soldiers wore captured helmets backward into battle-confusing enemy recognition. You consider trying the trick before shrugging and tucking it among your pack's spoils. The wind gusts, scattering loose pebbles down the slope. You look back at the empty gorge, now a silent corridor marked by conflict's imprint. Turning you, face the Alpine horizon, where the pass's final crest shimmers in frosted dawn light. The Roman pursuit has been repelled for now, but you know other enemies await. You sheath your pilum, rally the column, and begin the ascent once more, boots crunching on gravel, hearts steeled by recent triumph. In the narrow mountain world, each day's march is its own battle. Today's victory fuels the courage for tomorrow's climb. You lift your staff and whisper onward to the summit as the path coils upward into the thin sunlit air. You trudge onward, the gorge's narrow confine giving way to a gentler amphitheater of snow-dusted pines that tremble in the thin, cold air. Your stomach gnaws like a starved wolf. It's been 2 days since full rations, and the stretch of barley cakes and stray cheese hasn't sufficed against your marching burden. You hollow out a palmful of snow and press it between your lips, letting it melt slowly to stave off the pangs while you scout for something more substantial. Mainstream fact: Hannibal's supply trains suffered severe attrition during the Alpine crossing, forcing troops to subsist on reduced rations and foraged fodder. Historians still debate whether intentional ration cuts accelerated the descent or were a logistical necessity beyond Hannibal's control. Your lips numb, you scan the slope for signs of wildlife. Ahead, you spot a cluster of twisted pines, framing a rocky outcrop, a known haunt for Alpine ibex. Their tracks, slender and sharp, lace the snow. Hunger tugs your resolve, and you slide a hunting knife free from its sheath. You crouch at the edge of the clearing, breaths held in a silent vigil as 3 ibex pick their way among wind-scoured rocks. Their curved horns gleam like polished bronze in the sun. Fringe accounts claim Hannibal's Numidian scouts trained ibex to approach camps. Soothsayers whispered of a wild herd blessing the army with fresh meat. Yet here, the animals keep a wary distance, sensing your plight without compassion. You exhale and palpably taste iron in your mouth, the bloodlust of survival. Joke 1. When your meat delivery service arrives with hooves and horns. No menu included. You shift position, taking advantage of a low branch for cover. Drawing your bow, a compact composite piece designed for mountain use, you notch a hardened bone arrow. Each movement is slow, deliberate. One wrong twitch, and the herd bolts. Your fingers tremble with cold and anticipation as you draw the string back to your ear. Then, in a sudden flick, the arrow flies. It whistles through crisp air, and one ibex staggers, collapsing against icy stones. You exhale in relief as silence returns. You approach the fallen beast, senses buzzing with triumph and unease. You kneel and press a hand to its side. Warm blood seeps through your glove, a vivid reminder of life taken. Mainstream fact, ancient armies often carried salted meat to supplement dwindling rations, but fresh kills were prized for their vitamin content. Scholars still debate the nutritional impact of sporadic fresh meat on troop endurance. You draw your dagger and begin the work of field dressing each cut, measured and respectful, to conserve every ounce. As you work, the wind picks up, carrying the distant roar of the column's march. Your comrades shuffle into the clearing shields, scraped free of ice and eyes lighting at the sight of your success. One holds a sheepskin tarp. Together, you lay out the carcass for butchery. Fringe lore suggests that some Carthaginian cooks added foraged juniper berries and dried sage to game stews, lending both flavor and antiseptic properties. You sprinkle a few berries onto the meat, inhaling their pine-sharp aroma. Meanwhile, other men collapse onto boulders, ripping open their scant provisions. Hardtack biscuits, salted pork shards, and layering them beneath a small fire, you kindle with flint and pine resin. The flames hiss as melting snow drips into embers, sending up brief flashes of orange. Around you, the scent of roasting ibex mingles with resin's sweet smoke. You cut a chunk of meat and toss it onto the grill. It crackles, sizzling in the cold. Joke 2. When your grill is a rock and your meat's a goat, Alpine BBQ, no napkins needed. Hunger fades with each bite. The ibex's rich flesh coats your tongue, a taste of triumph in a desolate land. You chew thoughtfully, recalling Section 5's trout feast along a frozen stream. This meat is gamier, tougher, but infinitely more satisfying against the backdrop of snow and sky. Mainstream fact letters from Second Punic War soldiers reference occasional meals of wild game, but frequency was limited. Historians still debate how often fresh kills occurred and whether they materially improved troop health. With bellies sated, you distribute portions in measured ration 2 strips per man, ensuring every soldier, porter, and guide receives sustenance for the next climb. Elephants watch with tempered curiosity, their handlers offering them scraps of fatty muscle, which they gratefully tuck between lip and tusk. Fringe anecdotes note that elephants can digest leaner meats, but prefer the richer cuts. Carthaginian cooks tailored portions accordingly to maintain the beast's energy for hauling. Fires dwindling to embers, you wrap the final slices in cloth and tuck them into pack flaps, making a small reserve for emergencies. Around you, the men whisper prayers to gods of earth and mountain, offering thanks for nourishment. You joined softly, voice hushed, letting the gratitude settle into your bones. The clearing's walls, scarred by wind and ice, feel like an amphitheater, bearing witness to rituals of survival. As the sun dips behind ragged peaks, shadows stretch long and cold. You extinguish the fire and stow the gear, each movement now eased by warmth in your belly. The guide scans the western horizon, noting a shelf of rock that marks the path's next segment. You rise, staff in hand, feeling renewed resolve. The climb into thinner air awaits, but hunger's ache is banished for now. Together, the column reforms into ranks, infantry in front, beasts and porters in the middle, and elephants lumbering last to shield vulnerable loads. You lead the way onto the snow-packed trail, each step guided by torchlight and the memory of meat's rare comfort. In the swallowing dusk, you ascend once more, carrying with you the strength of fresh flesh and shared survival. The Alps' toothy peaks loom ahead, a challenge still unmet, but now faced with fuller bellies and keener spirits. Night's shadow deepens as you crest the rocky spur and plunge into a hollow, ringed by sentinel pines, their trunks pale in torchlight. The wind keens through the branches, carrying a cold so sharp it bites through cloaks and steel alike. Ahead, you see men huddled around drifting coals, their forms hunched against the gale. Frostbite's toll has grown unmistakable. Frost-scarred fingers, reddened cheeks, and faces etched with silent curses. Tonight you tend to the frost-bitten toll of frost's icy appetite. You kneel beside a young legionary named Marcus, his boots removed and feet wrapped in sodden bandages. His toes are mottled purple beneath bloody cracks. You press your palm against his calf, its warmth a lifeline, then slip your blade free and carefully pare away frozen flesh until the red muscle glistens beneath. Each slice is precise. Hesitation risks further damage. Haste invites agony. Historians still argue whether ancient battlefield surgeons understood gangrene well enough to amputate early or merely prolonged suffering with limited tools. Mainstream fact: frostbite was one of the most common non-combat injuries in high-altitude campaigns, often leading to partial amputations. Ancient medical treatises like those attributed to Hippocrates describe cauterization and poultices, but there's debate over their efficacy in cold preservation contexts. You fetch heated stones wrapped in oiled cloth pots of ember-bright warmth and press them gently to Marcus's frozen toes. He gasps as thawing begins, tiny cracks hissing like distant waterfalls. You murmur, "Hold steady. Warmth is coming." Fringe lore claims some Carthaginian healers infused oil with crushed marigold to soothe frost's sting and cleanse wounds. You sprinkle petals from your satchel into the cloth, their golden hue bright against snow's pallor. Men gather around, waiting their turn. You rise and move to Severus, whose ears are streaked blue from cold's silent siege. You cup his ears, breath misting between you, and fashion a hood of woven lamb's wool scavenged from pack saddle liners. The wool's lanolin content repels snow and insulates against sleet-driven gusts. You position it gently over Severus's head. His eyes flutter as warmth returns. Mainstream fact: ancient armies often used animal fats and wool to shield extremities from frost. Roman veterinarians treated horses similarly. Preserving equine strength, historians still discuss whether human applications were as systematic as those for cavalry mounts. Across the clearing, elephant handlers kneel beside their beasts, gasping as they soak flaxen cloths in hot water and wrap the elephant's swollen foot joints. You assist, tucking warmer cloth beneath folds of skin and draping hides to trap heat. The beasts rumble approval, their trunks curling in relaxation. Fringe accounts insist that elephants preferred cloth warmed by human body heat rather than direct fire, a curious comfort discovered during Hannibal's earlier desert campaigns. Embers sputter as a medic chants low hymns to Apollo and Asclepios, invoking healing deities to guide swift recovery. His voice blends with the wind's moan, an ASMR of ancient invocation. You kneel beside him, steadying a steaming bowl of broth water infused with crushed barley, salted goat cheese, bits, and wild garlic you foraged at dawn. You raise the bowl to Marcus's lips. He sips warmth, flooding his core. Joke 1. Nothing like a hot broth to defrost heart and toes. Eat your heart out, modern ramen. As the night deepens, you note the wounds. Hands blackened, noses reddened, limbs stilled by ice's hushed cruelty. Yet in each thaw, each whispered prayer, each stem of marigold, you glimpse resilience. Mainstream fact-field surgeries often took place under minimal light, exposed to elements. Some physicians argue that the use of alcohol-infused wine as anesthetic reduced infection rates despite sterile shortcomings. Debates continue over whether wine-based sedation or opium extracts were more common in Carthaginian medical kits. The medics next tend to Caius, whose cheeks bear the split of Frost's midnight raid. They apply a paste of clay and vinegar and astringent said to draw out cold's grip, then wrap his face in linen soaked in honey and wine, a sweet tang remedy that doubles as antiseptic. You hold Caius's head, offering silent support as the poultice takes effect. Fringe scholars claim that honey's antimicrobial properties were known empirically long before formal texts recorded them, that Carthaginian healers learned from observing bees' immunity to winter rot. You ponder this as the honey wine glaze sets its aroma curly as the fires smoke. With each treatment the men murmur thanks in a soft chorus. You rise, noting the clearing's transformation from a battlefield of the elements to a sanctuary of care, each steaming cloth and healing chant a bulwark against the mountain's embrace. You step to the warp of a tree trunk where fresh snow gathers, You wrap your hands in cloth and scoop smooth ivory lumps of snow into a pouch. Tomorrow's blizzard may cut off clear streams, and snowmelt will be precious for drinking and wound cleaning. You secure the pouch and nod to the lead medic. Resources are scarce, but preparation is key. Above the northern lights, ghostly ribbons of green dance across the sky, a rare lumen in the cold dark. You pause, breath held in awe, letting their ribbon-like shimmer fill you with quiet wonder. Here, amidst frostbite and firelight, nature's spectacle reminds you of forces beyond mortal struggle. Joke 2. When your cold therapy includes free light shows, talk about Netflix and chill. The medics finish for the night, weaving sage bundles into small braziers that smolder beside each injured man, the smoke believed to ward off infection and restless spirits. You help place a bundle by Marcus's side before settling near the embers, yourself staff in hand. The men drift to sleep, wrapped in storms of healing scents and the soft hiss of steam. You sit back, tasting honey and broth's residue, feeling the mountain's hush settle around you. Frostbite's toll will shape the coming days. Some will heal, others will leave blanks in the ranks, but tonight, care triumphs over cold. As embers fade and snow drifts over sleeping forms, you whisper a vow to each frozen soul. We carry you forward. The Alpine winds carry the promise, echoing through the pines and over the crags. Frostbite's bite may have taken its toll, but in every warmed limb and stoked fire, Hannibal's army stitches its resolve anew. You hack through a final stand of spruce and larch the air, thinning so rapidly each breath feels half spent before you finish it. Emerging onto a stony ledge, you find your Gallic guides waiting beside a trapdoor, narrow track, barely wide enough for a mule's hoof. Their faces streaked with ash and perspiration break into wide grins. This is the secret goat trail, whispered through generations and hidden from Roman sight. Mainstream fact: Hannibal employed Gallic tribesmen, especially from the Allobroges, Taurini, and Cavares, whose intimate knowledge of Alpine goat paths and smugglers' passages was indispensable. Historians still debate whether these alliances were forged through diplomacy or coercion. Your lead guide, Brenos, sweeps a gauntleted hand across the sheer drop beside you. Follow the ibex tracks, he murmurs, in fractured Punic. They know the path. You peer down at a faint zigzag of hoofprints dusted with snow, each one a silent signpost carved by nimble goats over centuries. You wipe your boots clean, crouch, and press your fingers into a print. The granular cold bites through your glove, yet you sense the rock's warmth beneath. Fringe lore holds that Gallic scouts once studded these tracks with crushed quartz to reflect moonlight guiding loyally through stormy nights. You turn your palm, searching for glitter. None remains, but the thought sparkles in your mind. Joke 1. When your GPS is goat positioning system, just follow the icons you stand and signal your centuria forward. Soldiers file single file onto the cliff-hugging trail shields, shouldered to deflect sleet and overhanging rocks. Beneath you, the valley yawns, distant peaks, wrapped in storm clouds, gullies carved by spring melt. Each step is a negotiation. With gravity boots, sink into frost-clotted shale ankles, twisting on loose stones. You plant your staff into the trail's narrow edge, testing solidity before shifting your weight. As the column threads the goat path, Brenos moves beside you, voice low. He points to ancient carvings in the limestone spirals and cup marks etched by pre-Roman shepherds believed to mark safe passages. Our fathers marked these, he says, tracing a design with his fingertip. They guided us from valley to sky. You watch his hand glide over the grooves, imagining generations of Gauls retracing the same route. Mainstream fact: prehistoric petroglyphs found in Alpine regions often align with migratory and herding trails, suggesting continuous human use for millennia. Scholars still argue whether Hannibal's guides consulted these markings deliberately or regarded them as background terrain lore. Ahead, the track dips into a narrow tunnel hewn by goat horns and frost, barely 2 paces tall and echo-charged. You crouch, adjusting your cloak, and press your ear to the stone wall, the drip of distant water, the hiss of wind, and beneath it, a subtle hum that you swear is the ghosts of goats passing centuries ago. You step through torch, held aloft, its small flame dancing on slick walls. Fringe sources claim Gaulish druids once performed consecration rites here, whispering invocations to mountain spirits. You murmur a quick benediction, Spiritus Montis, guide us true, and emerge, blinking into pale daylight. The goat path curves around a precipitous ledge, each pivot risking a sheer fall. You hear the faint bray of a goat above, and look up to see a lone ibex perched on a rocky pinnacle, watching your passage with curious gaze. Its silhouette is a masterpiece of balance and grace, truly at home where you feel every boot heel slip. You salute it silently. It snorts once, then bounds away along a barely visible ridge. Below, the trail drops sharply into a hidden ravine, where a foaming stream carves turquoise streaks into gray stone. You descend carefully, staff blade wedged for leverage, guiding porters past oozing moss and half-submerged roots. One misstep would plunge you into frigid waters, likely a swift end. You catch the glint of metal beneath the current, a discarded Roman helmet, dented and barnacled souvenir of a scattered patrol. Joke 2. When your river crossing includes unexpected subaquatic archaeology, no snorkel required. Crossing the stream on a fallen trunk, you steady the center note as porters file by, packs held aloft. You taste pine-tinted mist on your lips and shiver. This water is pure, but its chill steals breath. Mainstream fact: Alpine water sources provided essential hydration and aided wound cleaning. Historians still debate whether scouts memorized seasonal flows accurately or relied on trial and error. Back on the upward trail, you find a concealed alcove under a jutting overhang, a natural bivouac used by smugglers and shepherds alike. The guides kneel, drawing from leather satchels a handful of dried elderberries and sprigs of mint. You sip an infusion made by steeping them in snowmelt, its tang a balm against thirst and fatigue. Fringe botanical lore claims elderberries stave off altitude sickness. You inhale the tart steam and joke 3. Who needs altitude pills when you have grandma's pantry? Refreshed, you rise and survey your surroundings. The goat path coils into a narrow gully that angles higher toward the final crest. Elephants cannot follow here. Your lead guides have arranged for lighter mule convoys to ferry critical gear up alternative slopes. You brief your officers, directing infantry to forge ahead, while pack animals skirt lower via a secondary goat route marked by vertical nicks on tree trunks. Mainstream fact: Hannibal's logistical genius lay in splitting forces to match terrain infantry and cavalry on footpaths, mules on pack trails. Debate endures over how decentralized this command structure truly was. As you continue the day, wane shadows deepening between jagged stones. Torch-lit markers glow at intervals, small fires in metal bowls fixed to rock, placed by the Gauls to guide night marchers. Their flicker is a promise of direction when all other senses fail. You pause, watching the flames dance, and feel a surge of gratitude. These guides have given you a roadmap no Roman could follow. You reach a terraced shelf carved into the mountain, a broad platform once used by shepherds to rest their flocks. Here a rough bench of flat stones invites respite. You settle onto one, the rock cool beneath your cloak, and drink from your water skin. Soldiers around you unpack small portions of salted meat and ancient barley gruel, sharing with subdued reverence. The guides crouch by a miniature cairn of stones, adding a fresh pebble each in silent homage to the mountain's guardians. You rise, brushing grit from your tunic, and salute the cairn, an unspoken pact between traveler and terrain. Ahead, the goat trail dissolves into a snow-drifted slope that demands fresh courage. Yet, with these guides by your side, bearing rune marks, torch bowls, and whispered chants, you feel the Alps yielding beneath your feet rather than crushing you beneath their weight. You lift your staff and lead the column onward, boots tracing the faint hoofprints of goats and the deeper marks of human will. Each step beyond this ledge brings you closer to Italy's valleys and to the history you will unleash upon them. You hear the distant blast of a Roman horn echoing through the Alpine hollows, an urgent call slicing the wind, rousing your pulse like a drumbeat of pursuit. As you round a rocky spur, you glimpse the glint of Roman armor far below, legionaries advancing with measured determination, their shields forming a rippling silver tide inching up the slopes. You press your back against a frost-clad boulder, breath steaming in the chill. As the realization settles, the Romans have followed you into these heights, and now they seek to intercept. Mainstream fact. Historical accounts suggest that Roman forces under the command of Publius Cornelius Scipio deployed light infantry and cavalry rapidly in Alpine forays, attempting to catch Hannibal's rear. Scholars still debate whether these Roman units acted under direct orders or seized opportunistic moments based on local guide intelligence. You draw your gladius, its steel edge whispering free from the scabbard, and glance at your men, their faces pale but resolute. The narrow goat track offers no room for massed formations. Here, the battle will be carved by individual skill and the terrain's mercy. You whisper, "They cannot bring their legions here. We will choose the ground." A Roman cohort appears below on a ledge, their scuta braced against the rock's edge, pilum leveled in silent menace. Fringe sources claim Hannibal once used captured Roman testudo drills against the enemy, turning Rome's own shield tactics into a weapon of surprise, an irony whispered among Carthaginian veterans. You smirk at the thought and shift your shield to catch the sun's glare reflecting a bright signal to your flankers. Joke 1. When your flashbang is daylight, dazzle them, Hannibal style. Your centuriones fan out, taking positions above the Roman line on overhanging rocks and broken scree. You time your strike, a low whistle from your aide, and a volley of sling stones arcs down pinging metal with staccato notes, the ASMR of stone on shield. The Romans fire pilum in return, the spears thunking into earth and boulder rattling your shield rim. Mainstream fact slingers from Hannibal's Balearic contingents were prized for their accuracy, at range able to harry Roman ranks before close engagement. Historians still argue whether these skirmishes significantly disrupted Roman formations or simply delayed their advance. As the Romans scramble for cover, you charge down the slope with your cohort boots crunching on scree gladii flashing. The narrow ledge forces a bottleneck. Legionaries can only present a single rank of shields. You thrust your blade between two shields, slicing through animal hide straps beneath. A startled Roman cries out the sound, swallowed by wind and stone. Fringe tidbit: some Carthaginians wore brine-soaked cloaks that stiffened when dried, making their prime strike with added force. You feel your cloak's stiffened linen bite into your forearm as you lunge. The Romans attempt to countercharge heels, pivoting on frozen rock, but your men hold firm, lowering shields to create a miniature wall. You lean in, nudging a legionary's shield aside with your elbow and following through with a swift cut that barrels a pathway through the ranks. Joke 2. When Rome's invincible wall feels like paper mache. Sorry, not sorry. Behind you, your Numidian cavalry appears on a plateau, above galloping down narrow scree chutes to harry the Roman flank. Their javelins whistle through the cold air, thudding into backs and horses alike. You spin, catching the blur of feathered shafts, and raise your voice in a triumphant cry that echoes up the valley. Mid-battle, you notice smoke curling from a distant ridge, a Roman signal fire calling reinforcements. You realize time is short. The pursuers will soon gain numbers. You pivot to blow a call on your horn, a sharp rallying note that compels your forces to pull back in disciplined withdrawal. Your men respond without hesitation, shields, raised boots, sliding into retrograde steps. Mainstream fact. Tactical withdrawals under pressure were a hallmark of Carthaginian warfare, designed to lure Roman forces into terrain traps. Historians still debate whether Hannibal's feigned retreats in the Alps mirrored his later exploits at Cannae, or were unique adaptations to mountain fighting. You lead your cohort upward onto a hidden goat path branching above the combat zone, a route secured by your Gaulish guides. Below, the Romans pursue blindly, their heavy armor hampering their climb. You pause at a narrow choke point lined with overhanging rocks. Fingers numb, you pry loose a slab of limestone and heave it down the path. The rock thunders, sending an avalanche of scree onto the pursuers with a cascading roar that drowns their shouts. Joke 3. When your BMG is a boulder, stone-cold glory, the Romans scatter, struggling to stay upright under the rolling stones. You press on, rallying your men, each step a bolt of relief as you outpace your foes. High above the goats' trails, wind safely out of sight. At last you stand on firm ground beyond Roman reach. You turn to watch the Romans regroup below their ranks, broken by terrain and Carthaginian guile. You sheath your gladius and offer a silent nod of respect to your enemy's perseverance. In the hush that follows only the wind, the pines, and your labored breathing, you sense victory's edge. The Romans will not follow further. You signal the column to descend, each man exhaling in unison as tension drains from stiff limbs. The goat path eases into gentler slopes, and you lead your battered but unbroken cohort onward. Every footfall a testament to terrain's power when wielded with cunning. As you head toward tomorrow's summit, push you taste pine smoke and iron on your tongue, the echoes of Roman pursuit fading into the valley's hush. The Alps surrender their secrets to you and your men tonight. One mountain in a chain of mountains, each conquest shaping history's course beneath Hannibal's relentless advance. You trudge up the final switchbacks as dawn's first light ignites the eastern sky in pastel ribbons, pale rose, melting into gold, then into blazing saffron. Each breath tastes of iron and pine as you climb, the wind thinning until every inhalation feels precious. At last, your boots slip onto a knife-edged crest where the world falls away in buttery rolling waves of green. Below, Italy's fertile Po Valley unfurls like a vast tapestry. Fields quilted in emerald and amber rivers, weaving silver threads, distant towns, clustering like painted specks. Mainstream fact: ancient historians record that Hannibal's army crested the Alps near the Little St. Bernard Pass at approximately 188 miles above sea level, emerging into the plains of Cisalpine Gaul, a journey covering over 700 kilometers from Carthage. Scholars still argue whether the chosen route was the Graian or Cottian Alps, based on conflicting ancient sources. You stand at the summit's lip cloak, whipping in the cold breeze, and let the panorama unfurl your soul. The valley's winding rivers glint in dawn's glow, promising roads, Roman roads ripe for the march of elephants and legionaries alike. Yet here on this ridge for a heartbeat, you hold dominion over all below, conqueror and conquered intertwined in this charged moment of revelation. A low whistle draws your gaze to your lead elephant, its massive form silhouetted against the valley's brilliance. Its mahout deftly unhooks a length of goat hair rope, allowing the elephant to trumpet in triumph. The sound echoes across ridges like an ancient horn blast. Fringe lore claims Carthaginian mahouts trained elephants to recognize sunrise by scent alone through aromatic oils dabbed on their tusks, ensuring they signaled victory at first light. You sniff the crisp air, imagining hints of bergamot and cedar carried on the breeze. Joke 1. When your victory lap includes an elephant solo, talk about trumpeting your success. You lower yourself to one knee, tracing a finger across the carved notch in a weathered cairn. Another testament to travelers past. This notch aligns with the sun's first ray on the equinox, a celestial marker guiding those who dared this height. Mainstream fact cairns and sunlit notches served as prehistoric compasses for Alpine shepherds and armies alike, their placement often correlating with seasonal solar events. Historians still debate whether Hannibal's engineers intentionally utilized these archaic markers or relied solely on Gaulish guides. Rising, you turn to your officers, voice resonant. Behold Italy. Their faces, framed by sweat and frost, shine with awe. You watch their breath, plumes mingle with the morning mist before drifting sunward. The moment hums with possibility and peril. This is the promise of campaigns to come. You step closer to the precipice, hand brushing cold stone etched with lichen. The rock surface feels alive beneath your palm, its granular texture echoing eons of wind and water. Below you, imagine marching lines, threading through fields, crossing bridges that Roman legions built centuries later. It's a ripple of time collapsing into now. Fringe, tidbit. Some scholars believe that Hannibal's ascent was timed, so the summit greeted him on the winter solstice, symbolically demonstrating Carthage's domination over nature's harshest realm. You check your worn bracelet etched with lunar phases and note today's date, the 28th of October, by your reckoning, well shy of solstice season, but poetic nonetheless. Joke 2. When your GPS says you have reached your destination, and by destination I mean the edge of civilization, a distant bleat draws your gaze to a solitary mountain goat darting across crag and scree. It pauses, horns silhouetted against the valley sun, then bounds away along a slender ledge, the mountain's own triumphant exodus. You mirror its ascent in spirit if not in speed, feeling kinship with that wild agility. You turn back to face the valley, lifting your staff as though consecrating the land below. The scent of grass and tilled earth drifts faintly across the chasm, nature's perfume, beckoning you downward. Below, the sleepy ridges glow in dawn's warmth, and you spot the ribbon of a road snaking toward distant hills. That road will carry your elephants, your cohort, your Gallic guides, and your wounded alike into history's grand stage. Mainstream fact, following the Alpine crossing, Hannibal's forces reportedly encountered little resistance from local tribes, enabling a swift descent into the Po Valley's undefended plains. Historians still argue whether this lack of opposition reflected shock at the crossing's audacity or concerted diplomacy with Gaulish tribes. You signal your herald, who raises his horn and delivers a blast that rings like a call to destiny. The sound reverberates, bouncing off ridge to ridge, an echo of past glories and future conquests. Your army answers in a low murmur, drums, horns, and the rumble of elephant bellows, a chorus of resolve. You share a knowing glance with Brenos, your Gaulish guide. Years ago, you wondered if this place existed beyond legend. Now you stand witness to its truth. He offers a wry grin, then turns to sprinkle wine from a small flask onto the stone, an offering to the mountain spirits who guarded your path. You join him, adding a drop of amphora wine from your own flask, the rich sweetness mingling with rock and sky. Joke 3. When your champagne toast is replaced by amphora wine, at least it's vintage, circa 218 BCE. Finally, you withdraw from the precipice, turning your back on the summit's glow. Beneath your boots, the goat path unspools like a ribbon, your trail into history. You plant the Carthaginian standard in the summit's cairn, its horse emblem rippling in the breeze. You stand behind it, shoulders squared, and declare, "We descend as conquerors. Italy awaits." As the column reforms, you savor the final shards of summit air, weaving them into your spirit. Below, the Po Valley spreads wide, a landscape unclaimed by conflict, soon to feel the thunder of elephants and the march of Carthaginian steel. You take a deep breath, tasting pine stone and the thrill of revelation. Together, you lead the descent, each step propelled by the vista's promise and the pulse of history underfoot. And in that moment, the Alps are no longer barriers, but gateways. And you, Hannibal's chosen, stride beyond them into the annals of legend. You step onto the first icy slope of the descent, a sheet of glazed stone masquerading as solid ground. Your boots skid instantly, and you catch yourself with a flail of arms, heart in your throat. Below the valley yawns in a deep exhale of mist, a dizzying drop that promises oblivion should you falter. Each step is a negotiation with gravity. You lean your weight forward, digging gladius-spiked heels into the ice, while your shield scrapes a shaky arc against the frozen surface. A cold wind blasts upward, carrying shards of snow that sting exposed skin like tiny knives. You taste metal as each breath carries the mountain's chill deep into your lungs. Your cloak whips around you, pinning your arms, only to fling loose ends into your face. You wrestle its folds free, laughing through clenched teeth at the absurdity. Here you are, Hannibal's chosen, reduced to a flailing silhouette on an icy slope. Joke 1. When your retreat feels more like an audition for Alpine Swan Lake, toe point optional, mainstream fact descents from Alpine passes could be more lethal than the ascent, as armies risked ice slips, avalanches, and hypothermia. Ancient sources note that Roman historian Polybius recorded frostbite and falls, claiming as many lives on the return as on the upward march. Historians still argue whether Hannibal's engineers anticipated these dangers adequately or left troops to improvise survival. You spy a narrow cleft carved into a bulging rock, a precarious cleft barely wide enough for a single foot. The Gallic guide. Brenno's passes first, shoulder brushing the stone face, and you follow his path one boot length at a time. Your calf muscles burn with tension, quivering against cramp. Below the slope angles into a frozen scree field, where loose stones hide deadly gaps. You swallow bile as Brennos pauses, leaning his head close to whisper, "Trust the rock, not the snow." Fringe lore insists that ancient Carthaginians smeared mule fat onto icy slopes to create impromptu sled lanes for wounded, sliding them down faster than troops could march, a desperate tactic recounted only in oral traditions. You eye the slope's sheen and wonder if the tactic's thrill outweighed its terror. Joke 2. When your medevac is an unlicensed luge, we but hold the broken bones, a sudden crack, a thunderous pop, echoing from the ridge above, makes you freeze mid-step. You glance skyward to see a cornice of snow break loose, plummeting in a miniature avalanche. White thunder cascades toward you, and instinct takes over. You dive onto your belly, curling into a rock's shadow. The roar rakes past, rattling your ribcage like a war drum, before subsiding into an eerie silence. You lie, panting, eyes stinging, as powder drifts like ghostly ash around you. Once your heartbeat steadies, you roll to your feet, spitting out snow. The slope lies pockmarked with avalanche scars, chaotic gouges through ice and stone. You step carefully through the carved channels, each footfall sounding hollow against the stripped rock. The narrow path widens only briefly into a ledge littered with discarded shields and dropped packs, tangible evidence of panic. You pick up a fallen shield rim, tapping it with your staff, a hollow mocking clang. You hoist the shield, resetting its straps, and press on. Below, the valley's green glow tempts you with warmth and safety, but the descent remains treacherous. You pass skidding infantrymen who lean backward, like stumbling marionettes, limbs flailing. You offer a firm grip, hauling one soldier from a near plunge. He clings to you, eyes wide, and you murmur, step by step, do not look down, before pushing him forward. Mainstream fact, narrow Alpine ledges saw armies forming single-file columns, turning every misstep into a potential domino of disaster. Historians still debate whether Hannibal's strict discipline or sheer necessity maintained order on these death-defying descents. As you forge ahead, the path curves into a hollow where icicles hang like frozen spears from overhanging rock. Their tips glint in the pale light. You duck beneath gloves, outstretched, each touch sending shivers up your arms. Plink one drops and shatters on the slope's floor, the sound ringing like a warning bell. You leap forward narrowly, avoiding the shower of ice splinters. Your boots finally leave the rock and settle onto a patch of packed snow, somewhat safer, but equally treacherous. You slide briefly before digging in your heels, skidding only inches. Each slide hammers at your resolve. You taste grit and sweat, and the ache in your quads demands reprieve. You pause beside a battered mule that has lost a shoe, its hoof bleeding. You deploy a spare made of goat skin and wedged wood, forging a crude nail to secure it. The mule whinnies in gratitude, and you offer a reassuring pat. Fringe herbalists once used a poultice of moss and pine resin to harden mule hoof skins against ice abrasion, an improvisation not found in surviving texts. You marvel at the ingenuity, born of desperation, joke. 3. When your farrier's school is a mountain clinic, no diploma, plenty of scars. As dusk bleeds into the hollow, you glimpse a flicker of torchlight below a Roman skirmishing party, bold enough to follow you this far. The sight would spook lesser men, but you seize your gladius and shout an order. Prepare phalanx, shield walls, uphill. The infantry brace their shields above their heads, forming an inverted tortoise to catch falling ice. Chunks of frozen rock and snow patter against the shield wall like hail on a rooftop. You feel the impacts jarring through the shields into your arms. Your men hold firm gladii ready for Roman advance. You glance upward to the Roman lamps, their amber glow dancing on ice spires. They creep into your kill zone, unaware of the traps you laid earlier, frozen boulders wedged to release with a sharp nudge. A single prod sends a cascade crashing down, blocking their route and sending them scrambling for cover. The Romans retreat with curses echoing up the slope, torchlight flickering like wounded fireflies. You lower your shield, breath heavy, and hiss an exultant laugh. The descent's chaos has become another victory of wit and will. You signal your column to continue, and they move with renewed caution. Boots chiseling footholds into ice and snow. Beneath your feet, the goat track dissolves, at last into broken scree and evergreen undergrowth, the foothills reclaimed from the ice's rain. As the world softens around you, green needles, brown earth, gentler slopes, you feel hope stir like spring's first heartbeat. The dread of descent, despair, yields to cautious optimism. You pause once more, turning back to gaze at the rugged ridge you conquered. The zigzagging path you carved in felled stone and ice is a testament to human endurance etched into the mountain's face. You exhale, tasting pine and grit on your breath, and lead the final push downward, each step a step away from death's precipice and toward Italy's embrace. The Alps recede behind you, their white terror now a fading backdrop to the promise of plains where history awaits your arrival. You emerge from the final tree line as the valley floor spreads before you, fields laid out like patchwork quilts in greens and golds, ribbons of river cutting swaths of silver through fertile land. Your boots hit loam for the first time since the Alpine crossing, and the sensation is strangely foreign, each step soft, steady, unyielding. Behind you, the goat tracks vanish into the slopes. Ahead, the Roman roads beckon meticulously laid and awaiting Hannibal's tread. Your staff thumps against the earth, marking a rhythm that echoes through the Po Valley's morning hush. War elephants lumber beside you, their padded feet thudding in sink trunks, swaying like pendulums, measuring time. Infantry and cavalry fan out to form the vanguard weapons, readied, yet faces alight with the relief of firm ground. You take a moment to drink in the panorama, farmhouses dotting the plain, smoke spirals rising from hearths, and distant figures, perhaps unaware, tending vines and fields that will soon tremble under the thunder of Carthaginian steel. Mainstream fact, ancient sources assert Hannibal's army descended into Cisalpine Gaul after Alpine crossing, intact, estimated strength of 26,000 infantry, 6,000 cavalry, and 37 war elephants, though historians still debate attrition rates, suggesting numbers may have dwindled significantly during the crossing. Debate persists over whether Hannibal's force was as formidable upon arrival or whether the legend outgrew the facts. You signal a halt at the crest of a gentle slope. A Roman outpost stands below stone walls and watchtowers manned by surprised legions who thought the Alps impassable. Their eyes widen at the sight of elephants cresting the ridge. Shields clatter as men brace for an impossible encounter. You straighten, raising your gladius overhead in silent salute. The moment crackles Carthage's audacity, laid bare in a tableau of astonishment and dread. Fringe anecdotes insist that Hannibal's elephants wore bells carved from bronze. Their tolling was both a beacon for his own troops and a terror for Rome's soldiers unaccustomed to the beast's march. You glance at an elephant's massive flank, No bell, but the memory of bronze clamor lingers. Joke 1. When your cavalry's arrival playlist includes elephant jingles, beats the bugle call any day. Below, the Romans break and run. Their defensive formation unravels at the elephant's approach. Cavalry spurs horses into flight. Infantry hunch behind walls, peering over ramparts with terror-ridden eyes. You raise your shield in a slow arc, signaling your forces to descend in disciplined columns. Each step downward is charged with victory's promise. Rome's unguarded heart lies open for the taking. You lead the descent onto the road boots, pounding the Roman paving stone smooth, even built for ease of travel. The contrast is stark. Where fire-forged rock once threatened your passage, now you walk on craftsmanship. You feel the road's engineered perfection. Underfoot, each stone a testament to a civilization long confident in its dominion. Mainstream fact: Roman roads, such as the Via Claudia Augusta, were built with layered foundations, sand gravel, crushed stone, and polygonal paving for durability. Historians still debate whether Hannibal's army utilized pre-existing roads or relied on foraging local builders to repair broken sections. You order elephants to break rank and tromp the road ahead, tusks glinting as they carve new impressions into the paving symbols of Carthaginian triumph. Civilians emerge from huts, farmers clutching pitchforks, women shielding children, all staring as your army descends in slowly uncoiling lines. You catch one farmer's eye and nod respectfully. He offers a tentative wave before disappearing into his house. Fringe lore suggests local populations greeted Hannibal's arrival with a mix of terror and fascination, some even offering food and shelter to favor the invasion beliefs still debated by scholars interpreting archaeological finds and scant Gallic oral traditions. You wonder briefly whether goodwill blooms more from fear or hope. Your cavalry forms a skirmish line on either flank, spears, lowered horses, cropping grass. In an unfamiliar pasture, you allow a brief triumphant smile. Here at last is Italy. You raise your staff and speak to your assembled commanders. We stand on Roman ground, but our destiny is our own. Prepare for orders at first light. As the sun climbs, you oversee the setting of camp engineers, clear a field for tents, quartermasters, organize rations, and medics tend to lingering frostbite casualties on warm blankets laid atop shields. Elephants are unloaded of winter blankets, their riders offering soft fruits from local groves, grapes, and apples, gifts of the valley that will nourish beasts and men alike. You pause at the camp's edge, surveying the Po Valley's wide expanse. A hawk wheels overhead, its cry a soaring clarion in the clear dawn. You feel the valley's pulse, its wind in the wheat, and the rush of river waters, awaiting the thunder of war. Mainstream fact: Hannibal's entry into Italy in 218 BCE marked the first time war elephants marched on Italian soil, creating shock that reverberated through Roman politics and military strategy. Historians still debate the tactical impact of elephants versus the psychological terror they induced. You sheath your gladius and draw your water skin, lifting it in a quiet toast to the Alps, conquered the gods defied, and the plains to be claimed. You take a long drink tasting valley water, mixed with the mountain's last kiss. Joke 2. When your victory, champagne is Alpine spring water, still crisp but missing the bubbles, you turn to lead your army down the Roman road, each step carrying the weight of legend and the promise of conquest. As you descend the valleys, sense hay, fresh earth, and distant olive groves fill your senses with anticipation. The Alps fall away behind you, no longer barriers, but the stage of your triumph. Ahead lies Italy's green expanse, where history awaits Hannibal's charge. With resolute stride, you guide the march into the Po Valley, your heart humming with the resonance of mountains conquered and the echo of destiny fulfilled. In the gentle hush of Italy's dawn, let your breath slow as the Po Valley's breeze caresses your face. Feel the firm earth beneath your boots, a welcome return from the Alps' icy grip, each step a soft exhale of relief. Close your eyes and listen the rustle of wheat in distant fields, the murmur of lazy rivers, and the faint whisper of olive trees swaying in sunlit warmth. Allow your mind to drift through the journey, the Rhone's dark currents, the night-shrouded departure, the foothills' groaning climb, snow's first bite on outstretched hand, the avalanche's thunder, goat-borne passages, frost-scarred limbs, warmed by fire and broth, the clash on hidden ledges, and the final crest revealing a land of promise. Each memory folds into this moment, a mosaic of endurance, ingenuity, and triumph. Feel the valley's gentle lull cradle you war's roar, gives way to pastoral calm shields and swords, replaced by fields waiting to be sown. Invite each muscle to unwind the ache of ascent and the tension of battle dissolving like footprints in soft earth. Inhale Italy's sweet air, honeyed herbs, tilled soil, and gentle warmth, infusing you with peace and gratitude. Let your heart beat slow to match the rustling grasses, and let your thoughts soften into a quiet lullaby. Here in the cradle of conquered peaks, know that the pulse of history continues in your steady breath. You are both traveler and witness your journey complete and yet eternal in memory. Sweet dreams.